is to basically come up with new strategies. And as Geeta has already pinpointed, the various ways that we are experimenting with inclusion of science, inclusion of technology, inclusion of creativity or creative practices. What do these new strategies mean? What does community participation mean? So I was talking to the press reporter who was asking this question. How does community get involved? Community gets involved basically in this mandate by saying that they are the strength. When you say that you need to preserve or conserve the cultural landscape. Because it is beyond bounds or beyond measure for us to go and intervene into such a big space. When you start seeing it beyond the built form. When you see the space outside of the built form, it's not something that we understand in totality. It's only when the community joins hands with us as professionals, as artists or as practitioners, we engage in something which would be more creative conservation. Now, having said all of that, I'm going to run you through the kind of initiatives that we have as of now in the last 2 years attempted. Some of them are very recent, some of them have been going on for a very long time through Shrishti and through the different labs at Shrishti. To be able to say that what we're saying is all possible, whether it is in smaller groups or whether it is a small workshop or it's a big conference. So first one of this was a collaborative between Shrishti and BMS, which we tried and attempted last week, to be very precise, where we said, what if the same level or the same field of students from different methodological approaches came together? Do they have something to exchange when we say interdisciplinary or collaborative practices? And yes, they actually spent the whole day discussing how architecture students study spaces versus how public space design students study spaces at Shrishti, basically. And how both these methodologies are actually inverse of each other, but they have something to offer either of it. So one is not correct and one is not wrong. Then what does it mean to transit between these two spaces or between many such methodologies? So that was our first attempt to bring students, 30 students came together, and the dialogue that we initiated was, what does it mean to study places? Because they all had reached a certain stage in their thesis where whether it was at Shrishti or at BMS, they all had done contextual studies, or as we say, site analysis. So the question we raised was, why is it important to study a place? And does it mean something as a methodology in itself? Or is it actually always outcome driven? The next was, this was earlier, so this was in November, where we attempted something very similar but on a very large scale. We had 75 students of all the disciplines of masters at Shrishti who came together. We did try and invite other colleges and we succeeded to get about 3 teams from SPA Bhopal who participated. And these were again interdisciplinary teams. So not any one public space design or design student was paired with another one. They all 3 were from different backgrounds. And they were actually engaged into the act of meme busting. The title was Smart Cities, Big Data, Internet of Things, Digital Realities for about 3.5 weeks. They all actually were critiquing without any facilitation from the any teaching from faculty members. Facilitators were there only to guide them as to how papers are written or what references to read or what kind of arguments to build. But it was their take, so the take actually manifested in the form of an exhibition. It was quite an indigenous or quite an organic process to see what it means when such interdisciplinary teams come together to critique a subject of this caliber or capacity. In that same process, we had 15 mentoring sessions during the 3 weeks. So when we said mentoring sessions, again, they were not supposed to teach them or tell them what they thought about smart cities or what they thought about big data. They were just supposed to share what they knew about the subject. And what the students were left to do was interpret for themselves what it means to their position or to their endeavor in the larger process. Ultimately, it turned out into a 2.5-day conference, the first student conference perhaps, which was honored by 20 conference speakers, and none of them were actually again supposed to come and talk about what they do. The conference was about the student practice, about the teams, how they addressed this issue, and the panelists were responding to what was there on the screen. Whether it was on the screen, whether it was a prototype, whether it was a model. One of these teams actually then paired with the Art in Transit project, so what you saw in data prints under the title in Geeta's presentation. So this conference, which was actually happening within Shrishti, one of the teams decided to extend their work into public art, and they were completely given the platform to do that. So the conversations have actually had no boundaries. The other conference which happened last year was more of a scientific committee coming together to talk about conserving living urban heritage. We had 56 paper submissions from 25 countries. The publication of this is due this year, so it will be out very soon. And a similar dialogue was generated over there between professionals, academicians and practitioners. What does it mean to say that we are talking about living urban heritage, and how does one go about conserving it? When you say cultural landscapes, and when we say that the space is beyond the built form, the complexities of the struggles are that there are real people living there. Their real life, the day-to-day life exists. And into this, how do you conserve? What does the conservation practice mean over there? Under the UNESCO chair, one of the initial initiatives was on similar lines to actually set up a cultural center in Hoysala region, because Hoysala region has been studied personally by Dr. Hosagrahar for more than 5-7 years now. And under the UNESCO chair, it has been intervened into for about 4 years, about 2 years. So having studied the region, having understood what the place has to offer, the first idea, the first initiative was, how do you get into the space to be able to help, to be able to conserve, to be able to make value addition. So Kalagram Proposal Project was in collaboration with the government of Karnataka and the tourism industry to be able to say that, okay, what if we established a center which was run and sustained by the people themselves? What would such a model offer to the idea of sustaining living urban heritage? Coming down to the smaller initiatives or the activities, one of them is the studio which was recently conducted at Bidar. It's a part of the Deccani region in Karnataka, and the idea was to look into the idea of inherited urbanism, because Bidar is a historic town in itself, but it is not really devoid of any urban development. The urbanization or the urban development is ongoing as it should be. So the students were actually asked to reimagine narratives over there. They were actually asked to come up with new strategies of creating awareness about the heritage of Bidar, without saying that, okay, urbanization needs to stop. Because that is not the way out. Urbanization cannot stop because we need basic urban infrastructure. So what is the new dialogue that they can generate? So just to give you a sense, of course, all these courses which we talk about are all place-based learning, and they are all living lab practices. They are all open to multiple research methodologies. So when I say students were given Bidar as a platform, this is just one project. 14 different students came up with 14 different initiatives. So one student was looking at the water systems in Bidar. So that's the project which you're looking at. The other project might have looked at languages as a tool. Somebody looked at culinary skills in Bidar or culinary traditions of Bidar. Somebody was looking at the wall itself. So when we say cultural landscapes, we are actually allowing the students to break it down into the most tangible or intangible, the minutest details of a place. It doesn't need to be architecture alone or interiors alone or just one perspective alone. And then together what they can offer each other. So actually the project, when it finishes, all 14 of them together perhaps sum up what Bidar is as a heritage town, but not one perspective. So these were the other two projects where one student was looking at the idea of abode, and she was actually looking at how homestays could help revive the traditions of Bidar. Somebody else was looking at the call of the wall through the craft practices of Bidar.
I just want to interrupt and say they're not architectural students. So these are not students who had the formalism of architecture, have been in architectural studios. They're art and design students who come from a multitude of disciplinary backgrounds but who've chosen to take this project. So just to say that, so when you see maps, when you see that, so this notion of interdisciplinarity, project-based learning, place-based narratives, coming from people where you're not giving them that graded level 1 to level 10 before you can do that site. That's an important point.
So similarly, the older project was in Hoysala, and again the idea at that stage, so the earlier project, Bidar, was actually a project conducted for the 4th year students, so graduating students. So the project was very differently outlined. Over here, this was students of 2nd and 3rd year, and the idea was what I said earlier, so when you say that, you're talking about creative sustenance through for conservation. So the students were actually allowed to pick what works, what tells the story, and then how do they build a creative practice out of it. So this is just one project where the student thought that the way storytelling happens through the cultural games, through what people play every evening in Hoysala, is what should be sustained to tell the story of Hoysala. And she actually recreated these games in the, rather she contemporized these games to be able to bring them out of Hoysala into the real world, into the urban environments, so that the stories keep living. So to sum it up, what has happened under UNESCO chair so far, under undergraduate projects, Hoysala, Vadodara, Kutch, Bidar, and even the whole idea of just local practices has been studied extensively. We have a lot of PhD research going on. About 15 to 20 students are enrolled, and out of that, I've just listed out 4, but if I'm correct, there are 6 students who are actually doing their research under built environment and the idea of cultural preservation. We also have 2 new master's programs, which is Masters of Design in Heritage Design, Planning and Management, and Masters of Planning in Urban Design, Sustainability and Conservation. And both these programs, or rather overall the academics, is rooted quite intensively to the vision of the UNESCO chair. So what is being said is the chair doesn't really practice independently as a lab, but that's what is conducted pedagogically also. Next slide. And just to show you what the way ahead looks like for the next 2 years. So of course, the first 2 years have been very exploratory. Of course, there's no denying on that. And now what UNESCO chair plans to do is sort of start building institutional portfolios from one region to another without drawing much lines between different regions. Yes, climatically as well as geographically, these regions are very different. But when it comes to cultural landscapes or understanding cultural preservation, they are all intertwined. So Hoysala, Deccan, Western Ghats, Coastal Karnataka and Bangalore City are the first set of focus areas for the chair to take up the work for next 2 years. And that's where we look for collaboration and practice.
How is the event funded?
UNESCO chair. The UNESCO chair receives no funding from the government. No. That's why we do only the taught programs. It was one of the conditions of the MHRD support, because I think there were so many applications for UNESCO chairs from here to UNESCO. So when we went up, Jyoti and I went with the application to the MHRD, because the Secretary MHRD has to ratify it. And it's only the Indian government that can make the presentation in Paris. No, we can't go. So they said the condition is the government does not have money for arts and culture. And arts and culture and sustainability are not something for which we have the funding. So other UNESCO chairs, Arunachalam in Tamil Nadu got it, MS Swaminathan for his Arunachalam Center in Pondicherry, he got funding for his UNESCO chair. But we didn't. So we have focused it around our work, which is students and education, which we can do. Let us hope that one day we do get more funding to be able to.
When you teach students, you get the fees from the people.
Yeah, ours is fee based. Yeah, that's it.
Good evening, I'm Snehal. I guess, as you said, that you worked on 2 metro stations which had some permanent art installations and some programs and all going on.
And public space design.
Yes, public space design, precisely. So, is it in the agenda of the chair in future also that to make such things mandatory? Because a lot of things, like say for example, I would say my city, Ahmedabad airport, a lot of other spaces, we really miss all those things. So, I just wanted to know that, is it in the agenda or maybe it can be, how are you working if in case?
Well, in this case, the metro came to us. Funnily enough, it was, when we started Art in Transit, I was less optimistic than I am now. I have greater faith in the government and in how it turned out. Bangalore is just launching all its metros. It was the slowest off the ground. And they said these are the new public spaces. So I tell you, we won some and we lost some. Okay? We won the interior for Pina Station, we won the entire space design, lighting design, allocation of how people should move, even where kiosks and advertising should happen. We managed to get into it, and we did a lot of public art, so that they loved, and the events. Cubbon Park Station was completely planned, so we couldn't get into doing anything to do with it. They've got absolutely shiny mosaic floors, which means that anybody can slip and fall anytime, right? We couldn't change any of that, but we have been able to change some of their mobility flows. We've been able to do that. What we would like to do, and yes, it would be nice if the chair could get some action, and I think that the minister is listening to us now, so we probably will get action, is that I also want to get it tied to bus routes and bus commuting and the metro time with the bus time, because a lot of people come, like the Cubbon Park station's at the park, right? So if you want to come to the park on Sunday with your kids, and we've organized something in the park and in the metro station, then they should also know from where they can come. And so the design aspects become logistics design, systems design, public art, telepresence. It's a pretty big challenge, but for that we've just got a very big grant. So that part of the chair is flourishing. But again, I don't have anything to do with it. It's like the Ishita Das factor here. I have another girl there called Arzu Mistry, right? So they jump up and dance. They have the energy. All I have to do is make sure I sign the paperwork and keep them going.
And I would like to add on a small thing, that as you rightly said, that you need some connection between the buses or maybe the timing. In our case, I have a BRT station which is like 1.5 or almost 2 kilometers from my office. I a lot of time feel like going, but I cannot go in the sun. I mean, in afternoon of Ahmedabad, it's really impossible. So even I had suggested informally a lot of such things, but this is something that this is the need of time. Then that's how so much of costly infrastructure will be used in a right manner, probably.
I think that is the position we made to the chairman of the Dhamma Metro, saying at the moment he doesn't have enough footfalls, you see. So he's willing to listen to anything. So if we tell him we can design circular bus routes, not bus routes that are doing arterial bus routes, let the metro be the artery. We'll give you circular bus transportation with geolocation and sensor-based technology, so people know when the next bus is coming and they can look it up on an app. So they're willing to talk to us about these things right now. So let's see. But politicians come and politicians go. By the time we negotiate one deal, we don't know who the next person is.
One of your point, Bangalore to Banaras point. Bangalore is growing like anything.
Madly.
Madly, and infrastructure is dying.
Banaras has no infrastructure, it's still living.
So I just wonder how keen the planners or Srishti or they are taking keen role as a part of the.
Well, I think we're taking a key non-role, okay? Because what happens is the minute you tell somebody there's going to be an urban planning meeting for the city of Bangalore, and I say that I'm going to send a representative for that, I'm sending a message that whatever they do is going to make Bangalore better. Right? What we did instead is we had this huge critical confluence of people saying there's no such thing as a smart city, Internet of Things, big data, it's all going to destroy infrastructure. That's what we did, and we put it out. The minute the policymakers read the critique of what that kind of planning will do, we hope that it will help them sit and create perhaps a different round table. I think in some small way we won, because today the minister has just cancelled the steel flyover. That big steel flyover that was going to cut down 850 trees and was going to destroy the central landscape, and the deal had already been signed with China for the steel. So for the chief minister to step back, so it's a bunch of citizen action groups, voluntary action groups, students working on it. The Cubbon Park Metro, and including the revival of Cubbon Park, was again a very big pitched battle. by the chair and all the activism that we did, because Jyoti Vasagraha was at every single meeting of the vision group. Because there was a group saying that this is prime land, right? You're sitting on 400 acres of central real estate. And so now we've got the plan that that it will be shut for traffic, that on Sundays it will be purely pedestrian, that people can have events over there, people can, but we don't have enough buses coming. You know, people when they come there need to go home. So we need to keep working at design and infrastructure so that we can get.
So, talking about the smart cities thing, so the way the conference was planned, we actually had a mix of practitioners, academicians and industry. So we had IBM representatives, Cisco representatives and people who have planned the smart cities, I mean planners from Vadodara and elsewhere, who were there as a part of the conference. So what actually ended up being was there was quite intense contradicting conversations between the students and these panelists. We didn't have to do much. They were already questioning that if you are saying this, then how come you were a part of, designing a certain smart city in Gujarat? Those kind of actual conversations happened and which were allowed to be recorded. They're going to be out soon as a form of a digital publication as well.
How about the people who were living in smart cities or cities which were smart? Were they a part of this conference?
No.
Because
You are
it
right.
was one of those.
It was one of the things that, I mean, they all leapt up and did it, but we have in our pedagogy, to keep it going like this, we have this 4 weeks at Christmas time, which we call interim or interlude or something like that. And interim is run by artists. So we have 20, and it's very disruptive because they work on the city at very, very different levels of scale. So I told Ishita and another colleague, Naveen and others, I said, look, let's not take the Master of Design students into the interim space. Let's give them something else. So she had a very, very short time this year to put it together, but they did a good job. I think that in the future, we would like to get as many critical stakeholders. The only thing I'm very wary about is that we don't preach to the students and we don't indoctrinate the students. So I said, no teaching, only mentoring, let them discover.